Hey guys, welcome back to Emmalition. I'm Emma, this is Emmalition. It's been a minute since we've watched any of VaatiVidya's lore videos, and there's one in particular I'm interested in. The lore of Elden Ring is cursed because it seems to be about Mohg and that whole area where the DLC is going to start. The DLC is now less than a month away, and it feels like a good time to jump into this. It was posted 2 months ago, I think, so there's probably a lot that we've learned since then that I'm sure Vaati will update us on at some point, but I still think this is a good one to watch because I haven't seen it yet, and there's a lot that I'm probably missing that will help contextualize the trailer that just came out for me more as well. This just feels like a nice way to warm up for the DLC release. Let's learn some stuff. Let's theorize some stuff. And I think this is the longest lore video we will have watched. So this video is probably going to be quite long. So strap in, get ready, get your notepads, get your popcorn. Let's watch The Lore of Elden Ring is Cursed.
Up until last week, we didn't know much about the DLC. In fact, we knew... But now we know that the DLC entrance
Vaati, what
is
the hell?
here in Mohg Palace before Miquella's withered arm. I think it could be important to understand the circumstances of Miquella's death here at the hands of Mohg. So let's dive in.
Yeah, I don't think I actually know too much about this, so I'm excited. Oldas.
As the age of the Erdtree began, Mohg was born, of the union between Queen Marika and Lord Godfrey. Godfrey was the first Elden Lord, and as such, Mohg is one of the oldest demigods, alongside his siblings, who were Morgott and Godwyn. Mohg and Morgott were twins, born together and born as Omen.
They do look identical.
In stark contrast to their brother Godwyn, who was the golden child, so to speak.
There's always
Omen,
one, isn't there?
like Mohg and Morgott, on the other hand, were considered to be cursed. But
we spoke about this in previous lore videos, and the whole, like, I don't know, like, class, almost like, I don't know how I described it, but the idea that because a child is born different, they get banished underground, you know, makes me think the Golden Order is very, like, purist and disgusting and ableist as well.
Ah, the Omen. Skip this chapter if you've heard it all before, but I think the Omen are born by chance, sprouting these grotesque horns that are vestiges of the primordial crucible. So what is the crucible? The crucible is a melting pot of life that existed before the Erdtree, and its energies are actually what became the Erdtree.
Oh wait, we didn't put captions on. And for people who want to complain that the closed captions for me are now over this, you can move my closed captions to the top so you can read Vaati's and mine at the same time. So I don't want to hear you complaining.
It's here that there was this blending of many creatures' physiological aspects, like feathers, tail, knot, scale, fang, and horn. What's truly noteworthy about these aspects is that they would sometimes come to grow on creatures that weren't supposed to have them. For example, kill a deer or sheep, or even an ancestral follower in the lands between, and there's a tiny chance that you'll receive a budding horn.
I don't think I've noticed that before.
I think are not unlike the horns of the Omen. The budding horn reads, "This horn began to sprout on a beast that typically bears no horn."
Ooh.
Perhaps it is a vestige of the primordial crucible.
Did we know that? I don't think I knew that. I don't think I've heard that before. That's really cool. I think we gathered before that the crucible, or rather the creatures that the Golden Order deem less than and imperfect, are kind of just like the ragtag gang of people that don't fit in. And I kind of am rooting for the Omens because of that. I feel like they represent the underdogs. I quite like that, even though I absolutely despised going down into that sewer area with all the Omens because it was too scary.
According to the Crucible talismans, there was a time when these aspects, like horns, were once considered signifiers of the divine. And that makes some sense because these aspects stem from the Crucible which
Knights
did become the Erdtree, so why wouldn't they be considered holy? And
That's a good point.
It's during this time that we have to assume that the ancient warriors known as the Crucible Knights were knighted, serving Lord Godfrey.
Since we've last spoke, I have a Crucible Knight tattooed. It's on my calf. I don't know if there's any way for me to gracefully show you this, but I'm gonna try. Oh dear, this is gonna be bad. Ta-da! I'll just post a photo of it on screen. What is wrong with me? Okay, anyway.
And fighting with many aspects of the Crucible, including horn, tail, breath, and even wing. But fast forward
really
to the current age, and the Crucible Knights are lost, scattered all over the lands between, fighting for different causes or for no cause at all. And that's because Queen Marika's Golden Order abandoned them. The Crucible Gauntlets reveal that, in time, the strength shown by these knights, and even their appearance, came to be looked upon with scorn for having such close resemblance to chaos. This matches a wider trend in Marika's Golden Order, where things were moving away from chaos and the Crucible and even the Erdtree, and towards fundamentalism instead, as the age of the Erdtree progressed. But the Crucible Knights got off easy, all things considered. Take these creatures, for example. Previously, they were seen as
really
divine
sad.
for having aspects of the Crucible at birth, but eventually they came to be called misbegotten.
It actually breaks my heart. Like, it really makes me sad that these were once like worshipped. And I feel like we actually see this in real history and society as well. And I currently don't have the brain capacity to think of anything. If I do, maybe I'll edit it in. But I feel like there's things that were once worshipped that are now just frowned upon. And these creatures were, parts of the Holy Crucible and are now just like looked down on and hacking at bodies just to survive, and are kind of like strewn across the lands between with no real home. And I just find that really sad, and I hate it. And
Instead,
I hate the Golden Order.
A word that really sends the vibe that these were now seen as contemptible creatures bearing ill-gotten gains. The misbegotten became seen as impure, a fact revealed by the spirit ashes of perfumer Tricia, who was a healer who dedicated her efforts to treating misbegotten and the omen as well.
Oh, that's so
the
wonderful.
omen and the misbegotten
so sore.
certainly needed treatment, as many of them suffered these grievous wounds as a result of their horns being cut.
No, stop. I actually can't. Oh, is this a prepare to cry? I thought this was a lore video. I hate this. It really upsets me, and it makes, oh my God, I paused this so much. We're not even 5 minutes in. It's like the dehorning of like elephants, the detusking of elephants and rhinos, and then also the way that people will like dock their dogs' tails and stuff like that. And I just find it really sad. It makes me think of like animal cruelty, and I hate it. I hate it so much.
Tough.
Anyway.
Those responsible for these wounds in particular were the Omen Killers, a sect of Leyndell butchers who had full authority to hunt the Omen
these guys.
and amputate their horns. So, in my opinion, the tradition of cutting off Omen horns would have begun because horns are the offending part of the Omen, as they represent their link to the primordial crucible, which is something that became this accursed concept.
I wonder why though.
And Omen do bear more aspects of the Crucible than just horns. Mohg has a set of wings, just like the Misbegotten, and Morgoth might as well, though they're only really rigged in his animation files. Instead, Morgoth has a tail, just like the Crucible Knights. All that said, the defining aspect of the Omen are definitely the horns. That and their brute strength were enough to label them as Omen, distinct from the Misbegotten, but still born by chance, though many Omen were apparently born directly from the Erdtree's royal line. Two of the darkest items in the game are the Omen Bairn and the Regal Omen Bairn. The word bairn means child, and these items are dolls. They're fetishes that were fashioned to memorialize Omen children who are dead, or who might as well be.
That's really...
The Omen Bairn's description reads, Omen babies have all their horns excised, causing most to perish, and those that survive live alongside those memorialized by the regal Omen Bairn, which reads, "Omen babies born of royalty do not have their horns excised,
that
but
explains.
instead are kept underground, unbeknownst to anyone, imprisoned
Mohg.
for eternity."
Does that mean the ones then down here are born of royal lines, the ones that you fight in this area?
Some
Must do,
concessions were made for Omen, as opposed to the
right? Which makes sense because this is under Lanedale. Maybe they're like cousins. Royal cousins.
misbegotten. Two Omen children, Mohg and Morgoth, were, after all, a part of the Golden lineage, so the royal omens weren't mutilated, as long as their horns were out of mind and out of sight.
Sad.
And speaking
Makes me
of
sad.
sight, a horn seems to be responsible for Mohg literally being
I've never noticed that.
blind, as it has grown relentlessly into his eye socket.
Damn.
Incidentally, there's a bit of a trend with blind characters in Elden Ring and in other
there's
From Software games.
There's the girl, I've forgotten her name, it's been so long, but the one who gives you the grapes, or you give her the grapes, and it turns out they're eyeballs. And then there's a few others as well. Who else in FromSoft is blind? Oh, the Maiden in Black, she's got wax in her eyes. There's quite a lot of that, you're right.
Games
You're
as
right,
well,
Vaati.
and it's that those blinded are,
There she is.
ironically, able to see what sighted folk cannot. For example, in Elden Ring, it was the exiled prophets who accurately foresaw the flame of ruin burning down the Erdtree.
Yeah.
It was the guilty, their eyes gouged by thorns, who glimpsed an outer god in the
Ow.
darkness. There are lots of examples, so I guess coincidentally or not, Mohg, half blind and wounded, eventually did come to stand before an outer god of his own as well. And he met her deep underground. This outer god was called the Formless Mother.
Yes, I remember this
The Mother
now.
of Truth. A fitting choice for the Omen, whose true mother had abandoned him.
That's so sad. He's been abandoned and cursed to live
We've talked
underground.
about outer gods in other videos, but long story short, they're these cosmic, Lovecraftian entities that
So
are at
cool.
once extremely powerful, but also strangely limited in how they can influence events in the lands between.
Hence,
Instead of
America.
getting involved directly, they will often commune through envoys or vessels, and in the case of the Formless Mother, her subject of communion, or one of them at least, was Mohg. The Blood Boon incantation describes
Ooh.
Mohg's meeting with this outer god. It reads, "The Mother of Truth craves wounds."
Gross.
When Mohg stood before her, deep underground, his accursed blood erupted with fire, and he was besotted with the defilement that he was born into.
Well, good
The
for
text
you,
also
Mohg.
describes what happens when you cast this incantation. You thrust your arm into the body of the Formless Mother, then scatter the blood flame to set.
Okay, I'm sorry. This is going to get slightly vulgar. But the Elden Ring DLC trailer, both of them, and the key art and things that they've been releasing, if you've watched my story reaction trailer that went up the other day, and if you've seen the photo of one of the bosses that got revealed, it's all very womanly or female anatomy based. Lot of vaginal imagery. I'm just gonna say it. Lot of vaginal imagery. So there's obviously the egg that Miquella is protruding out of, and then there's a lot of the literal first scene appears to be Marika putting her hand into what honestly looks like a vagina. It just does. Someone said it looks like maybe a godskin. I thought it maybe looked like Malekith's first phase beast clergyman. And there's all sorts of goop, and then there's a boss that looks like a uterus. So there's a lot of motherhood and birth and vaginas, which is, you know, if you're interested in that kind of thing, there's a book called The Monstrous Feminine that I studied when I was in college, because I still am a big fan of Alien, and that's obviously maybe a bit on the nose in hindsight, but at the time kind of pioneering in terms of representing the childbirth and motherhood in a horrific way. And I feel like Elden Ring is moving very much towards that with the DLC. And interestingly, this formless mother, you have to put your arm into it and then blood comes out. Is that what he said? Let me go back just a couple seconds. Oops.
Accursed blood erupted with fire, and he was besotted with the defilement that he was born into. The text also describes what happens when you cast this incantation. You thrust your arm into the body of the formless mother.
You thrust your
then
arm in,
scatter the blood flame,
and scatter the blood. Is no one else thinking that's giving periods or something? Or just meant to represent? I'm sorry, this is probably gross, but it's not my fault. It's Miyazaki's fault. I wonder what blood boon means. Do you think that means anything? I'm just Googling on my phone. Boon. It's just coming up just about Elden Ring. What does boon? Boon, benefit or favor, especially one that is given in answer to a request.
to set the area ablaze.
Okay, fine.
So, there's a lot to break down with this
Oh,
one
he's already going to do it for us.
But let's start with the fact that this outer god is at once both the formless mother
to be quiet, don't
and the mother of truth.
Okay.
So what exactly do these titles mean? Let's start with the formless mother, because I feel like that title is easier to rationalize. She is likely formless because liquid blood is her essence. And incidentally, the word formless is also used to describe the dragon communion seal in Elden Ring, which is also made of blood. But let's cast our net beyond Elden Ring.
Yes, let's go to Bloodborne.
Where an extremely relevant parallel to the Formless Mother exists in the character of Formless Erden, which is also an outer god of sorts. The Erden Carol rune states that blood is the essence of the Formless Great One,
Oh.
Erden. And while I absolutely think that the universes of Bloodborne and Elden Ring are separate, I'm confident that From Software are reusing a concept from Bloodborne here in Elden Ring. So it is that I'm confident that blood is also the essence of the Formless Mother. That said, the Formless Mother still has a body of sorts. We thrust our arm cross-dimensionally into it when we cast Blood Boon, and when we rip our arm out, we scatter not just blood, but blood flame. Thus, while I think the Formless Mother absolutely has an affinity for any blood, I think her essence is more accurately blood flame.
Okay.
And she's not the only outer god with a flame of her own.
I don't know if
The
fire
Fell
really
god
fits
has
into the
Giant's
vagina
flame.
thing.
Death has black flame and ghost flame. Frenzy has frenzy flame, and you could even theorize that the Greater Will has the golden fire that spews from the mouth of the Elden Beast and Placidusax. So, flame is commonly a sign of an outer god's essence, and I think the Formless Mother is no different, with a blood flame that continues to threaten rupture on those afflicted long after it touches their flesh.
I can't shake this thought of it all being a motherhood thing and a in utero womb thing, just because of all the other parallels, especially when he says the word rupture. I can't shake it. We'll unpack it later, maybe.
The Formless Mother's other title is the Mother of Truth, and this title is a lot harder to interpret. The Mother of Truth. What truth?
Yeah.
The only character that we know of that the Mother of Truth has appeared before is Mohg, so we're kind of forced to judge her character through his. And while I guess it's possible that the Mother of Truth venerates the absolute truth or a broader truth, the fact that she chooses to act through Mohg is at least a little bit telling. We know that she bestows power upon accursed blood, and I think this preference for accursed blood might be a part of the truth that she represents.
Okay.
I think she might prefer to act through those who are unfairly cursed, like the Omen, like Mohg.
Okay.
And I say unfairly cursed because that's kind of what curses are, always in From Software games. Curses are always the domain of the gods, and they're always delivered pretty heavy-handedly. Take Dark Souls, for example, where Gwyn, a god, refused to relinquish his Age of Fire, opting instead to curse humanity with undeath, so that they might fuel his fire until the world turns to ash. Pretty over the top, right?
Yeah.
And Queen
Extreme.
Marika is actually very similar to Gwyn in that she's a god who arrogantly thinks her order is perfect to the point where she'll do anything to try and preserve it. Her hubris is alluded to in the Mending Rune of Perfect Order description, which states that the current imperfection of the Golden Order, or instability of ideology, can be blamed upon the fickleness of the gods no better than men.
Okay,
and it's this same hubris that led to the scorn of the Crucible, and I think the curse upon the Omen as well. To make things even more unfair for the Omen, their curse appears to largely be one of perception, of hate. The Omen-Bairn description conflates these two things and speaks from the perspective of an Omen child.
Gorgeous
who pleads,
art.
Please don't hate me or curse me, please. I also think this notion of curses being unfair is explored further in the Dung Eater's questline, where
sad.
the Dung Eater goes around defiling others and spreading the Omen curse. He calls this defilement his cursed blessing, because if he defiles everyone, in the end, everyone will be cursed, and therefore
that's pretty smart,
no one
actually.
will be. Thus, in his ending, a sort of cursed justice is restored to the world. Elden Ring has this consistent theme where characters turn their curse into their strength, and I think the Dung Eater and Mohg are perfect examples.
I wasn't prepared for this level of like emotion and wholesomeness. Like, I didn't think I would feel this emotional about it, like turning your what other people perceive to be your weakness or what's wrong with you into a strength, and your own unique like offerings and talents is really nice. And you know what, on your first playthrough of Elden Ring, or mine anyway, you kind of see the Dung Eater and Mohg and all the omens as like really scary and just kind of like shoot first, ask questions later. But honestly, in hindsight, they're my favorite characters and they're my favorite enemies, because I just feel like, I don't know, these are just the exact kind of people that you would be rooting for if this was like a movie, right? And it was told from the perspective of these guys. You would hate Marika, you'd hate the Golden Order. I mean, I do. Probably most of us do at this point, but it's just funny because they're all like pure and golden, and you think they're like, I don't know, probably off the bat it seems like they're the good guys. And I honestly think Miquella in the DLC is going to turn out to be the big bad at this point. Like, that's what this is leading me to think. And that maybe Messmer isn't the bad guy. Well, he will be a boss, but I think Miquella is going to turn out to be the one we need to stop. I don't know. I think he's going to be the big bad. I'm just getting a feeling.
And this is just my theory, but I think the Mother of Truth might bestow power upon the accursed, because the truth is that curses of the gods are unfairly given. There should be nothing wrong with being born with omen horns, right? It's just this genetic trait, a vestige of the primordial crucible that was once even considered divine. But thanks to the Golden Order, these creatures are now considered omens instead. So I'd like to argue that this unfairness is why the Mother of Truth bestows power upon accursed.
The Mother of Truth is a fan of the underdogs.
Of course, this is just my theory, and I welcome any challenges to it in the comments. I think challenging each other respectfully is how we can get a bit closer to the truth.
He's wholesome.
Speaking of, I saw arguments ages ago that stated that the formless mother is responsible for the curse of the omen. But I'd like to challenge that idea. I'm not sure it can be correct. For one, it's stated that Mohg first stood before the Formless Mother underground, and he was only down here because he was already banished here for being Omen, so he must have been Omen before this meeting. What's more, when he did stand before her, it's stated that his accursed blood erupted with fire. Thus, his blood was already accursed when it erupted with fire. Finally, it says Mohg was besotted with the defilement that he was born into. Thus, he was born Omen, like all of the other Omen children.
I agree with that.
Born to be shunned in a wretched mire underground. But I think there's a reason that people argue that the Formless Mother created the Omen, and I think one of the arguments is that Morgott, Mohg's brother, also has blood flame attacks, just like his brother. So I think people reason that blood flame is therefore synonymous with having accursed blood and that all Omen have it. But that's not true, because only Mohg and Morgott seem to have blood that was set ablaze.
From the
It's clear
Formless
Mohg's
Mother
was set ablaze in item descriptions, and it's clear Morgott weaponized his own flaming blood by recanting it, but no other Omen fight with blood flame. So
it was definitely a gift.
reckon they both received this blood flame from the Formless
That's
Mother.
cool.
I think the Formless Mother appeared before not just Mohg, but Morgott as well, even though that's never mentioned. Only difference was Mohg embraced this
Morgott
power,
still
and Morgott spurned it.
ride or die for the Golden Order.
Morgott only uses blood flame against us in his boss fight as a last resort. Morgott's blood flame became
Great sword.
a cursed sword that reads, Weapon of Shifting Hue, used by Morgott, the Omen King.
Iridescent.
The accursed blood that Morgott recanted and sealed away reformed into this blade.
That's really cool.
For him to have this, I think, proves that it wasn't just Mohg that was approached by the Formless Mother, it was Morgott as well. They were both underground, assumedly sealed in the same place, after all, so I think both of them had their accursed blood set aflame. I think the Mother of Truth, like so many other outer gods, attempted to influence a demigod, and I think they failed with Morgott, but succeeded with
So
Mohg.
interesting.
In the
That's
end,
so
both
interesting.
Mohg and Morgott weaponized their trauma. For Mohg, we can look at the cursed blood pot, for example, which you throw at enemies to douse them in accursed blood, causing summoned spirits to assail them with a rabid fervor, a childhood memory of the Lord of Blood. It's basically saying that Mohg remembers being attacked for his accursed blood as a child, and considering the blood specifically motivates spirits to attack, it might be referencing Mohg's experience of being haunted by evil spirits.
I'm so
According
sad.
to the Omen Smirk Mask, evil spirits haunt the Omen in their nightmares. So with this cursed blood pot, now
As he
Mohg
should.
could give others a similar experience.
As he should.
The Mother
the
of
poor
Truth
guy.
craves wounds. She desires bloodshed. Swarm of flies, blood boon, blood flame.
The way it says she craves wounds, I wonder if that also means she craves like wounded individuals. Like she's kind of targeting traumatized people and people with curses. So she craves wounds physically, like blood and creating wounds and bloodshed, but maybe she also craves wounds as in people.
Everything to do
Wounded
with her
people.
is designed to let the blood flow. So the Mother of Truth's base desires are quite simple. But does she want more?
I don't know,
Where do
Vaati, does
her
she?
goals end, and where do
I need to know.
Mohg's begin? Well, beyond specifically wanting to empower the accursed, and beyond craving bloodshed, the Mother of Truth doesn't seem to want much.
Okay.
Take Mohg's
She's a
sacred
simple
spear,
woman.
for example. It's called an instrument of communion with an outer god, and all it seems to do is pierce the Formless Mother,
Ow.
coating the blade in her blood flame.
Owie.
That's it. That's the communion. What's more, this sacred spear is a design that will come to symbolize his dynasty. Not the Formless Mother's dynasty, Mohg's dynasty. The Formless Mother might enable this, but at the end of the day, she is behind
She
Mohg's
made
dynasty,
him.
but she's not the face of it. So the most you could say, I think, is that she has ambition, yes, but she's not interested in being this god that's worshipped.
Yeah, she's just like the behind the scenes, like, coach, you know? She's just trying to help him make a name for himself.
I think that's very fitting for an outer god, actually. Instead, it's Mohg's ambition that we should talk about. And it's Mohg's ambition that led him to leave the sewers long ago, probably as soon as he could overpower the shackles that bound him here. This battle you have down here with Mohg is actually with an omen illusion, not unlike the fight that you have with Morgoth's illusion. Omen have this ability to conjure illusions. We can
very
sort
realistic.
of infer that from the soundtrack, which calls them omen illusions. Morgoth uses his illusion to hinder the Tarnished. His is pretty easy to understand, but it's kind of hard to understand why Mohg's illusion is down here in the sewers. Mohg's true location is a bit of a mystery, so maybe he put the illusion here to throw trackers off the scent and sort of pretend that he was still in the sewers.
Or he was trying to stop people getting to the frenzy flame. That makes sense, right? Because it's right behind him.
Did he leave it here to prevent access to the frenzied flame? Because
That's what I said.
his brother Morgoth does something similar down here after all. This illusion of Mohg might even be conjured up by Morgoth, because I just noticed that it seems to erupt into golden particles when it's defeated. Still, it's impossible to know for sure. Anyway, nearby you can find an omen shackle. These shackles have lost most of their power now, and indeed Mohg has long escaped the sewers, and not even the All-Knowing knows where to find him.
Oh yeah, that idiot.
But he's here, somewhere underneath the land of Caelid, a so-called
Lord of Blood,
who rules in the ruins of an ancient civilization, which he has decided will be the seat of his coming dynasty.
It's badass, to be fair. Like, you can't fault him on the architecture. What did he just say?
This place is drenched in blood, swarming with Mohg's servants, and the crumbling palace itself is awash with the formless mother's blood flame.
It's very cool.
But it was not always this way. The map of Mohgwyn Palace reads, "In the lightless depths lies the cave of an ancient civilization. It is here Mohg, the Lord of Blood, is building his palace, to be the seat of his coming dynasty, named Mohgwyn." So, this ancient civilization existed long before Mohg. What was this place? This ancient dynasty isn't given a name, but everything here should look very familiar. The underground woodland evokes the one found in Shifra.
Oh, Shifra. I didn't know how you said it.
The same bearded figure as the statues in Uld and Ul. These are the remains of an ancient dynasty that can be found all over the lands between.
But he's just taken over a small part of it.
Has very intentionally started to build his dynasty on the remains of their own. Mohg calling his rule a dynasty is intentionally evocative of the ancient dynasty. We know about this ancient dynasty because of the oracle bubbles, which are the sorceries of the claimant who served as priests in the ancient dynasty. The description goes on to state,
that was a nice transition.
Search for lost oracles within their bubbles. And there's a whole video to be had on this topic,
a whole video on bubbles.
I won't go too deep into this for now, especially since their culture doesn't really seem relevant to Mohg at all. Because I don't think Mohg is intent on
he's building a new dynasty,
the old dynasty,
for sure,
or continuing it. Rather, item descriptions stress that his is a new dynasty. And if there's anything from the old dynasty that's
still around, it's purely for aesthetics. He clearly likes vintage design, and I respect that.
He does use, like, the architectural remains of the palace, or even possibly the antiquated Latin that he speaks. I feel he might be trying to evoke the old dynasty because he might have envied how widespread the old dynasty was, and I think he wants his dynasty to have this air of legitimacy.
I could see that.
Something it sorely lacks at the moment. Mohg's new dynasty is very different from the old. The Swarm of Flies incantation sums it up well and reads, "The new palace of the Lord of Blood lies in a swamp of festering blood." These flies can be cast as a
Gross.
Blood Oath incantation, which are spells directly linked to Mohg's own power. But aside from the incantation, these flies also spawn from the blood-tainted excrement that you can loot in this area, which contain dense colonies of tiny eggs of unknown but assuredly revolting
It's
origin.
all poo and
The
pee,
roped
isn't
fly
it,
pot
Miyazaki?
elaborates, stating, "The maggots found in waste feed on blood and turn into vicious flies that are pitiably short-lived. Their fangs inflict countless lacerations on the victim, while the grating sound of their wings assails their sanity. And specifically, these flies spawn from the excrement of carnivorous beasts, of which there are now many in the new
Ouch.
dynasty, all festering with these bloody pustules and being even tougher than their kin on the surface."
That's
So,
just great.
Yeah, not a great place. And yet, many disenfranchised beings still seem to choose to reside here, soaking in the festering blood swamp.
Honestly, fine, because if you're being that mistreated and unwanted in the lands between, and then you get a leader like Mohg who is all about the less appreciated members of society, maybe you would swim in a shitty blood swamp. Maybe I would.
Which brings us to the Albinaurics here. In a way, the Albinaurics themselves have accursed blood, not unlike the Omen. The Albinauric blood clot reads, "Albinaurics are life forms made by human hands. Thus, many believe them to live impure lives, untouched by the Erdtree's grace." Now, this is just my own speculation, but we know that the Formless Mother bestows power upon accursed blood. So do you think maybe it's fitting that of all the creatures in this blood-soaked land, many of the Albinaurics have found a way to weaponize the blood? I think they've accepted Mohg's tainted blood quite well.
That's really awesome,
The red
actually.
Albinaurics stand apart from their silverkin, who sit dejectedly upon the cliff face.
Oh,
The red ones
no.
patrol the area and fight with attacks that are actually unique.
The silver
from
ones are
every
just
other
down
Albinauric in the
bad.
game. Even their model is a little bit unique.
Ew, they're
beyond
just little
just
red
being
guys.
red. Look at their heads and you'll see these tiny little omen horns sprouting. Personally, I believe this is because they've been soaking in blood. Specifically, I think they've been tainted by
Kind of
Mohg's
adorable.
omen blood. We know from the Seedbed Curse icon and the Dung Eater questline that it's possible to spread omen horns, or at least that horns are an aspect of
That's kind
a
of
defilement
adorable.
that can be spread. So I think that explains why they're sprouting horns here. And there is also evidence that reveals Mohg was attempting to share his accursed blood with others. This leads us to Vare,
Okay.
the war surgeons who were abducted by Mohg, who wanted to see if they could tame the accursed blood.
Oh my god. This is too much. I don't even know what to say. I feel like I'm not adding much, but I'm
As
just
you
blown
enter
away.
the Mohgwyn Palace grounds, 3 white-robed invaders assail
Yeah.
you, one after the other. These are the nameless white masks, and they kind of have fascinating lore to speak of. The white masks wear the war surgeon gown, which marks them as war surgeons, who were effectively
I don't think I
mercy
knew
killers.
this.
The dagger talisman elaborates, stating that the white-garbed field surgeons come to the aid of friend and foe alike by dealing a final deadly thrust to spare them from the prolonged agony of a mortal wound.
That's
So
kind of
their name is a bit misleading, as there
very
isn't
nice.
really any surgery occurring here that could save someone's life. Their favored weapon is the Misericord, a dagger with a name that
Misericord.
translates to mercy, and it reads, "Dagger favored by military physicians in white. Medicine is mercy, and mercy upon the battlefield is ruthless."
It's interesting that the only medicine they can really give for battle wounds is just death, because they're that bad. and the kind of curses and wounds that you come into in the lands between are that bad that it's like, hey, could have given you some paracetamol, but instead I'll give you a dagger to the throat, which I guess is mercy, and medicine is mercy, as it says there. I'm blown away. I love Mohg. I think he might be my favorite character at this point. I can't believe this. This is so awesome.
The White Mask's weapon is found in a storage quarter of Stormvale, and their talisman is found in Volcano Manor, so it's kind of difficult to say which faction they served, if any. After all, they delivered death equally to friend and foe, so they were probably a common sight on the battlefields.
War doctors, nurses, they don't pick sides, do they? They're there to save lives, because that's the vow you take as a medical professional, is to save lives in an unbiased way. So it makes sense that it's for friend and foe alike, because especially when the waters are so muddy in Elden Ring, who's to say which side is correct? Except Marika's.
Of the Shattering.
Hers is not.
Regardless of their allegiance. Their choice of white clothing is curious as well.
Pure.
In war, white is the color of truce, which is appropriate for these somewhat neutral characters. And incidentally, I think white also shows bloodstains a lot more starkly. Maybe that's why the color was chosen as well. These characters definitely got their hands dirty as they delivered their mercy.
Their hands.
But constantly delivering mercy would eventually cause them to turn depraved. The dagger talisman ends with the line, "A sense of mercy is a catalyst for bloodlust," and their weapon warns one to beware the killers, clothed as men of compassion.
Ooh.
So the war surgeons inevitably developed this taste for blood, and it was this very fact that eventually led to them being targeted and abducted by Mohg. The war surgeon gown reads, "Of the surgeons that were abducted by the Lord of Blood, none were able to tame the accursed blood."
You think because they're surgeons or doctors, Mohg maybe thought that they could help cure the curse or something like that, maybe? Or control it. I'm not sure at this point.
None but Vare, that is, though he was an exception.
Vare.
Therefore, the war surgeons, these nameless white masks that assail you in Mohgwyn Palace, ended up here because they were unexpectedly abducted by the Lord of Blood. This reveals that Mohg was searching for potentates who might be able to control the accursed blood that he had been graced with. It's more proof that he was looking to share his accursed blood with others.
Okay.
And considering these surgeons now...
Maybe he wanted to share it with Miquella because he thought it might help him. Maybe? I'm trying to think. Maybe he almost sees it as like a blessing and a cure for things. Maybe he thought sharing it with Miquella would... Oh, I don't know. I've just pulled that out of my arse. Never mind.
Now invade on behalf of Mohg. It seems clear that they were happy on some level to have this new violent outlet.
Just rolling around in a pool of blood. Woo!
Only one of their number actually manages to tame the accursed blood as Mohg desired, and that's Vare. But what does that really mean, to tame the accursed blood?
It's creepy.
Well, earlier we speculated that the Albinaurics are growing horns because they've been doused not just in blood, but in Mohg's accursed omen blood.
Yeah.
And I really do think that there's a lot of evidence that Mohg is trying to find worthy recipients who can tame his
To build
essence.
an army?
Because
or a war
instead
council,
of the phrase
maybe?
tame the accursed blood, the original Japanese actually says something a bit closer to accept the accursed blood.
Oh.
Which brings me to this interaction
Okay.
with Vare, where he gives you a wound and you accept what is assumedly Mohg's noble blood.
Give me your finger. This noble blood will be an immutable badge of honor once it settles inside of you.
Owie.
Oh, good heavens. Clench your teeth or something.
So British.
The bloody finger item, which is your finger, I might add, reads, "Glistening blood has been siphoned into the nail of this finger. Its sickly pale skin feels nothing now, but the nail still aches with the sweetest pain.
The sweetest pain.
Never forget that feeling of agony,
Interesting.
for it is what binds you to Luminary Mohg, to all of us.
And with a fresh infusion of this accursed, noble blood, you can invade other Tarnished and sate your bloodlust, materializing out of blood in other worlds, just like Mohg does. But that's not the only way that you can invade with what is assumedly Mohg's blood. You can also do so with a festering bloody finger.
It's got little horns on it.
These are consumable items.
Has it?
And they're not your finger this time. And 3 of them are given to you by Vare, and he gives them to you as a test of sorts.
Oh, I have a gift for you, something fit only for the wise.
Oh.
A means for circumventing the draw of the 2 fingers. Give it a try, won't you?
Vare
Thanks,
is
dude.
hoping that you'll use these to fuel a bloodlust of your own, thereby distracting you from the allure of the 2 fingers.
I get it.
Who have other plans for you as a Tarnished. And if you prove this bloodlust to Vare, you'll be inducted into their order, and you'll have blood infused into you, perhaps as he and other war surgeons once received.
I knew it from the very start. You have a taste for noble blood.
As opposed to the bloody finger you can receive, these consumable, festering bloody fingers are blackened with blood congestion. And if you look closely, what looked like omen horns
I got it.
appear to be writhing
Yay.
at the end.
I feel like I'm in class
Reinforcing
getting the
idea
answers
again
right.
that it's Mohg's accursed blood that had been injected into these
If
fingers.
you finish that Vare quest, you get sent to Mohg Palace in like a shortcut, don't you? Or have I completely imagined
before
that?
they were cut off. The description goes on to state that these festering fingers have been chopped off rather unceremoniously.
Hacked off.
The lack of ceremony indicates a measure of disappointment with the owner of these fingers.
Rather than
I
it being
think.
an honor.
And that's
Yeah.
why I think these fingers once belonged to other inductees, just like the nameless war surgeons who
Yeah.
failed to accept the infusion of Mohg's blood. Note this dialogue from Vare if you deny him.
Maidenless.
You will die nameless, without ceremony.
So the nameless war surgeons are likely also those whose fingers were unceremoniously chopped off, it seems. They're a warning of what could happen
got very
to you
shiny
if
eyes.
you listen to Vare's speech, which is enticing in its splendor, but full of deadly consequence. Despite this harsh treatment of his subjects, Mohg is different to the 2 fingers, according to Vare, at least. And one of the key differences, apparently, is love. In his dialogue, Vare laments that the 2 fingers have no love for the Tarnished, but Mohg does, he says. Incidentally, the Tarnished are kind of related to Mohg via Godfrey, in a way. We're all of the same bloodline, so I guess it is true that we are at least somewhat alike. Vare really is very loyal to Mohg, and indeed, amongst all the war surgeons, Vare is actually the only one that's capable of incanting Blood Flame Blade, a spell that coats his weapon with what we know is the essence of the Formless Mother.
Ooh, maybe Mohg was able to gift Vare due to his like undying devotion to him or something like that. Maybe he was able to share the accursed flame with him in that way.
Vare has
That's
been
kinda
granted
cool.
strength beyond any other character in Mohg's dynasty, it
Yeah.
seems, and Vare is no doubt eventually very disappointed in you when
Yeah,
you teleport
yeah.
to the palace early, before the new dynasty has even begun. This is what leads to an optional
I never did
confrontation
this.
with Vare and his death.
Oh, Luminary Mohg, please grant the strength you promised.
Oh boy, you got sold a dream.
Have given everything.
He was sold a dream.
You can teleport to Mohg Palace early with the Pure Blood Knight's
Yes,
medal, which
yes,
is something
I
Vare
remember now.
gives you if you prove yourself to him.
I've gone out of my way to provide
So he gives us the talisman and then gets mad about it.
one to you.
Tell you
But
what.
you mustn't use it just yet. The meeting must wait until the Mohg dynasty commences.
He did tell us not to. Okay.
Luminary Mohg
Fair
yet
enough.
slumbers beside the divinity.
Now that we've
Ooh, slumbers beside the divinity. Do we think he's referring to Miquella?
been inducted,
In the egg?
we start to see Mohg's luminary vision and can learn how Mohg dynasty is supposed to come about. The Lord of Blood's exaltation talisman explains, reading, "Render up your offerings of blood to your lord, drench my consort's chamber, slake his cocoon's thirst."
Render up your offerings of blood to your lord, drench my consort's chamber, slake his cocoon's thirst.
His awakening shall herald the dawn of our dynasty. So he's specifically saying that others should make offerings to Miquella. And
Drench
I
my
think the ones
consort's
he's
chamber.
telling to make the offerings would be his bloody fingers. By invading,
Why would Miquella want
killing,
that, though?
I think we might just be making offerings of others. And I think also these offerings would be made by the sanguine nobles, who are just as aggressive as the bloody fingers are if you find them out in the open world. For example, this is one of many.
Yeah, these guys are
sanguine
rough,
nobles,
aren't they?
and you fight them here at the Rose Church in Leonia.
In all the blood
it's likely
and
named
pustules.
after the blood rose, which is an item deeply related to all things bloody. And the building itself is a sort of parish. It's a church that operates in a foreign land, and it's no coincidence that it's here that Vare attempts to recruit you. In fact, the enemy inside the church is supposedly a recruiter as
He's
well.
testing
although
us.
I kind of question their recruiting techniques. The sanguine noble hood is worn by
You're
nobles
funny.
who serve the Lord of Blood and reads, "Known to strike from pools of blood, these assassins are missionaries, come to share the gospel of accursed blood." Just like the red Albinaurics, the sanguine nobles have started to grow omen horns, and their rank seems to exceed that of the Albinaurics, as can be inferred by the noble in Mohg Palace, who stands before a crowd of Albinaurics. Again, rather than being true omen, I think this is another instance where
Mohg is just spreading his seed to create an army of slightly horned people, and it's kind of badass, I'm
being
not gonna lie.
infused with Mohg's accursed blood has led to their horns growing, a cursed blessing, as the Dung Eater would say. Their robes go on to read, "The grand metallic pattern on the shoulder is a signifier of the noble rank they intend to claim,
Creating
upon
a
the
hierarchy
advent
off
of
the
the new
bat.
dynasty they
Nice.
are working to install. And their weapons are designed to rip the flesh with sickening efficacy, suggesting that they really are working to install this new dynasty via the blood loss of others, making offerings for Miquella's cocoon.
What does
And
that
again,
do,
I think
though?
the bloody fingers are the same way.
You know?
Yura calls the bloody fingers tarnished, held in thrall by cessblood, zealots who stalk their own.
If it isn't Nereus, the bloody finger, the end is nigh. For you.
God, the voice acting in Elden Ring, I forgot. It honestly gives me chills. They absolutely cleared with every single hire in this game. It's beautiful. I cannot wait for the DLC so we can get even more of it. Oh my God.
Yura is familiar with many such bloody fingers, none more so than Eleonora, who is the one he loves, and she's the one who he considers to be the deadliest bloody finger of all.
I'm dying to see you,
Oh, it's so good.
Eleonora. Violet bloody finger.
In the end, though, Eleonora kills Yura here at the Second Church of Marika. And this church is interesting because despite being a Church of Marika, there's clearly been an attempt by Mohg's adherents to usurp it.
The pustules
Note the blood
and the blood.
roses, the sanguine noble who appears here, the hound here festering with blood, and of course Eleonora herself. Eleonora is one of Mohg's bloody fingers, the most dangerous of them all, if Yura is to be believed. Perhaps it's for this reason that Mohg might have entrusted her with the purifying crystal tear, an item that can nullify the effect of Mohg's Rite of Blood attack. Either that, or she has somehow procured this purifying crystal tear because she has a secret plan to attack Mohg.
Ooh.
You could definitely speculate in that direction as well, I think, if you wanted to.
I love the build they went for this
wields
video.
a twinned naginata, a weapon that's forged in the land of reeds, which is a place locked in civil war that has become alienated from the culture of its neighbors. Little wonder, it is said, that the entire nation has succumbed to blood-soaked madness.
Wow.
It's on this note that I'd again like to return to the description of formless Erden
Bloodborne, we're
in
back.
Bloodborne. Specifically the part that says both Erden and Erden's inadvertent worshippers surreptitiously seek the precious blood. Earlier we established that Erden and the Formless Mother clearly have some overlap, and I speculate that this overlap could extend to Erden's inadvertent worshippers as well. Inadvertent means unintentional or accidental worship in this context, and I think that the Formless Mother might have many, many children, because I think you can make a good case for her having many inadvertent worshippers of her own.
So you would
After all,
consider children to be inadvertent worshippers, I guess, because they were born and they're bound to love their mother.
Blood-soaked madness
despite all
of the
of it.
land of reeds has led more than one of their number directly to Mohg. Introducing Okina, who is a demon of a swordsman. His bloodlust led him into combat with Mohg himself, and his sword tells of this story, stating, when Mohg, the Lord of Blood, first felt Okina's sword and madness upon his flesh, he had a proposal to offer Okina the life of a demon, whose thirst would never go unsated. So it was that Okina became a bloody finger of Mohg, cutting down his enemies with rivers
it's
of
so
blood,
good.
a cursed sword which has felled countless men. Weapons like these are really
So
powerful
good.
when paired with the Lord of Blood's Exaltation talisman, which gives you an attack boost if blood loss is triggered in the vicinity. And one amazing little lore detail is that this Captain of Godric actually gets the attack power buff whenever there's blood loss nearby,
Ooh,
hinting
ouch.
that he's actually carrying the Lord of Blood's Exaltation talisman, and that he is thus an adherent of Mohg. The weapon art he uses, Bloody Slash, also suggests as much, as it is a blood oath skill granted by the Lord of Blood. So it seems this Stormvale captain has either defected or is secretly loyal to Mohg, or he has a dual allegiance. I love that it's left open to
Yeah,
your
that's really cool.
interpretation.
I
The
never would have
talisman
picked up on that
itself
myself.
is dropped by Esgar, a priest of blood found in the catacombs below Lane Dell, the same place where Mohg first met the Mother of Truth. He wears the robes of an adherent of Mohg, except for his great hood, which reads, a burial shroud of sorts, for those who discover, at long last, the truth they sought. I think this could be hinting that Esgar found the Mother of Truth.
I love how it's all coming
here
together.
below,
This is amazing.
but it's hard to say for sure. Speaking of which, it's unclear if Mohg has ever shared the fact that he communes with the Formless Mother at all. Most worship of her appears to be really indirect, and bloodshed for the sake of bloodshed seems reason enough for her, and those that perform it as well. Perhaps it's for this reason that the All-Knowing casts doubt on Mohg's title, calling him the so-called Lord of Blood.
That's harsh.
Oh, so that's where the so-called Lord of Blood was
I
hiding
hate this
himself,
guy.
eh?
He's
Perhaps
so
this
rude.
lack of clarity about Mohg's rule is why even item descriptions cast doubt on Mohg.
Because he's not been frank about the fact he can commune directly with the Formless Mother. So people are just like, well, you can't just call yourself a lord and act like a god with nothing to back it up. But I mean, it's hard to say I'm communing with the formless mother when she's formless. You know, what's he meant to do? What's he meant to do?
The reigning lord and hierarch of the coming dynasty of Mohgwyn, or perhaps a raving lunatic.
Why not both?
After all, can blood offerings really lead to the awakening of Miquella?
Oh, the awakening.
The remembrance of the Blood Lord does state that no matter how much of his bloody bedchamber he tried to share, he received no response from the young Empyrean. But Mohg...
I'm sorry, what? No matter how much of his bloody bedchamber he tried to share, he received no response. What was he doing to that egg?
needs Miquella to awaken. Because Mohg doesn't just want to be a ruler, he wants legitimacy in the eyes of the world. And since Miquella is an Empyrean eligible to be the god of this world, he could give Mohgwyn a legitimacy that might match even the Golden Order, which is structured in a similar way. It has a lord and a god at the forefront. So, it's time to finally talk about Miquella, for if he does awaken, then it's very likely that this will lead to the coming dynasty named Mohgwyn, and whatever nightmares that may bring.
Quinque!
Miquella's nightmare. This is too
Whatever
much.
nightmares that may bring is an extremely ominous
Yeah,
line,
what the hell? I'm
especially
scared.
considering Miquella has a dreaming alter ego. So to explain that quickly, like many other characters in the game, Miquella has a duality to his character. On one hand, you have Miquella, the unalloyed, who helped his sister resist the effects of the Scarlet Rot, who grew a home for the low and the meek, and who is cursed with eternal youth. But then
Miquella grew a home for the unloved and the lost and all of the misbegottens, and maybe that's why Mohg wants to rule with him, because he feels heard and understood, and like the fact he's been rejected by society won't affect the way Miquella sees him and won't affect his respect for him. Also, just on the duality of things, there is obviously a duality with Miquella's personality and life form, and I literally just thought there's a lot of twin mirroring things in Elden Ring, which we've spoken about before, but even Mohg having only the one eye and then the horn in the other represents a kind of duality as well.
on the other hand, Miquella is also Saint Trina, a mysterious character that has powers relating to sleep and dreams. The symbol of their faith is this.
There's loads of stuff to do with this in the new story trailer that I feel like I didn't quite cotton on to because I just wasn't thinking about it at the time, but I'm going to have to go and rewatch it in a minute.
Trina's
I think.
lily, which dulls the senses, preventing agitation. And it's no coincidence that this lily is shaped just like Miquella's lily, for the nascent Miquella is Saint Trina, or they're moonlighting as them in their dreams.
That's so
to speak.
interesting.
And whatever Saint Trina has been doing, it's made a really good impression on a great many people.
How does the dream
The
come
Lands
through
Between
to
is
our
a pretty
reality?
harrowing place, after all, and to get relief, it seems, some people have
They're snoozing.
turned to Saint Trina, whose lilies help them get away from it all. Priests of Saint Trina also exist, crafting sleep arrows to spread their teachings. The sweet oblivion of sleep can become quite bad.
Miquella's just a drug dealer.
Another such item is the sleep pot, which says, like a lullaby or a quagmire, its light purple haze irresistibly draws its victims down into sleep. Sweet dreams.
Sweet dreams.
Incidentally, the
I didn't
word
know it said
lullaby
that.
brings to mind another piece of cut content to do with
Oh,
Miquella,
don't. I'll cry again
where
at these guys.
The red-eyed merchants were once taught
No, I'll
the
cry.
song that they play in their tomb by a mysterious
Breaks
figure.
my heart.
And fittingly, Saint Trina's full cut name is Saint Trina of the Cradle Song, which connects them to the merchant's song.
Oh.
In cut merchant dialogue, it's stated that the one who sang for them now sings no longer. The singer is missing, just like Saint Trina, because the one who sang was Saint Trina. And we don't really have to just rely on cut content to tell us of that fact. An item called Favor's Cookbook suggests that St. Trina is missing as well, as it is a record of crafting techniques left by a man who was utterly captivated by St. Trina. He continued the search for her in his slumber. So he was searching for her because St. Trina went missing.
Into her
St.
dreams.
Trina's sword reads, St. Trina is an enigmatic figure. Some say she is a comely young girl. Others are sure he is a boy. The only certainty is that their appearance was as sudden as their disappearance. So St. Trina went missing. And returning to cut dialogue, we also learn about a character called Rico, a cut NPC who claims to be Miquella's humble servant, and who we believe
maybe this is the one who wrote the cookbook.
Finds Miquella's body at Mohg's palace. Here, Rico states, "Finally, I have found it. St. Trina, no, Lord Miquella's cadaver. I have partaken of untold secrets, such that I may aid you, O Lord. So please, I hope you welcome your humble servant, Rico, into your dream, the world of your heart." So, Rico believed that he was finally going to be able to aid Miquella and enter his dream, now that he'd found him in the physical world. Before the DLC trailer was revealed, I would have said, yeah, I reckon the DLC will take us to Miquella's dream world. It sounds like the perfect place for DLC, right? But now, with the recent trailer, it can't be that simple, because the interviews featured in my DLC video make it quite clear that Miquella's cadaver will instead take us to the Land of Shadow, a place that was once physically a part of the Lands Between.
This is going to be so good.
Before it was veiled and obscured by Queen Marika. In that video, we speculated that the Land of Shadow might be a place where the dead go. We speculated that it might be a kind of afterlife, or at least it might have once been a sort of afterlife before the Erdtree sort of took over that role.
This thing is covered in horns, and I feel like I didn't clock that before because I'm now in the headspace of just thinking about the accursed blood and omens and Mohg, but I didn't notice that thing was covered in horns before. And this to me looks like a mask, which is and then there's blonde hair on it as well, which could be a callback to Miquella. So there's horns and Miquella, Mohg and Miquella. What is this thing? I need to know.
Took over that
desperately.
Role. We reason this because Miquella is said to have divested himself of his flesh to get there. The poem reads, "It was to this land that Miquella departed, divesting himself of his flesh, his strength, his lineage, of all things golden." Of course, we don't yet know the true nature of the Land of Shadow, but it is kind of fitting for St. Trina, of all people, to have died to arrive in this place, because death in Elden Ring has long been linked to sleep. For example, when Roger succumbs to Deathroot, he says this.
"Lately, I feel I'm on the precipice of falling into a deep, fathomless slumber. And I have an inkling it could spell trouble for you somehow."
Roger is almost hinting that he might be a threat in some realm.
I'm dying to know how the sleep/realm of shadow relates to our world and how they can cross over. I'm so interested.
And he's kind of right, because later we do find Roger, or a part of his vitality at least, which has been weaponized by fear. We do this inside of Godwin's deathbed dream, a phrase that obviously has sleep connotations as well. So I wonder, with death being so linked to sleep, could Miquella have planned this death in his own slumber so that he could travel to the Land of Shadow? One piece of evidence for Miquella's death being a sort of deep sleep could be the slumbering egg, which is an owl egg that will never hatch, prized as a symbol of the most sublime
owl
slumber.
egg?
The egg is this powerful parallel to the situation with Miquella's cocoon. Miquella's cocoon was taken by Mohg before it was ready to hatch. Just so, this egg is looted from killing an owl, and thus is also taken before it was ready to hatch, perhaps before it was even ready to be born. The owl inside will never hatch, it's essentially dead, and this egg's description reminds us that this state of death is the most sublime slumber
Inside
there
the
is.
egg, just like Miquella.
So
That's
I
cool.
conclude that there's a strong parallel between the slumbering egg and Miquella's cocoon. Touching the arm that extends out of the cocoon will bring us to the land of shadow, where Miquella traveled, long before us. As per the IGN interview, Miyazaki states that players will be following in Miquella's footsteps in the same way that they followed the blessings of the Sites of Grace in the lands between. And of course the player is not the only one who is curious about Miquella. There are several other characters in the world and NPCs who have been following Miquella as well, and the player will encounter them on their journey in the land of shadow.
And beat their
They will
butts.
make new friends and enemies, we hope. Fittingly, Miquella does have many followers, so does Saint Trina, and while no one seems to know for sure where they disappeared to, it is rumoured. Gideon's dialogue reveals that he suspected Miquella was with the Lord of Blood, and there's even a phantom in the consecrated snowfield who points towards Mohg Palace as Waygate, and they died knowing exactly who took Miquella as well. And then of course there's Rico, that cut content character who senses their master needs their aid. Indeed, Saint Trina and Miquella seem to live on, beyond the death of their flesh. And while the Land of Shadow might not literally be the dream world that many expected it to be, there is evidence that Saint Trina's presence has been felt here.
Yeah.
For example, this is Saint Trina's lily in the base game. It looks a bit sad, right?
Sad.
It only has a tiny hint of purple left. So this is why I wonder, could this lily in the background be a true lily of Saint Trina? It does appear to be more whole.
I think
and it appears
that jumped out
in
at me as
a sort
well.
of quagmire of sleep here. There's that signature purple sleep hue, and there's a masked character
Looks like the
who
War Doctor
is slumbering
masks.
in this place. Incidentally, another thing I missed was that you can actually spy some lilies in the background of this fight as well. So perhaps this boss is linked to Saint Trina? But I digress. Miquella's actions
There's
are
so
becoming
many
clearer to us,
possibilities.
but that still leaves Mohg. First up, how did Mohg manage to abduct Miquella? Well, earlier we talked about how Mohg abducted the war surgeons, presumably to test the accursed blood on them. So already Mohg has a bit of a history of abduction, and if he can materialize
5-finger
from
discount for
blood
everyone.
anywhere, like this cutscene suggests, and like his sanguine nobles and bloody fingers seem able to do, well, that would certainly explain how abducting Miquella was relatively easy for him.
He can just appear
especially
anywhere
if
and take
Melania
anyone.
was away fighting Radahn at the time.
Yeah.
So during Miquella's abduction, he was ripped out of the tree. There's clearly a large gap here in the tree-like woman's form, almost as if this figure was pregnant with Miquella. And indeed, Miquella sits atop a giant pelvis bone in Mohg's palace, showing just how wholesale he was ripped from the Halig tree itself. The Mother of Truth
I
desires
didn't even notice
a
the
wound,
pelvis bone.
Indeed. So we know what
I
happened.
didn't notice.
But why?
I'm such an idiot.
Why did Mohg think abducting Miquella was a good idea?
I didn't notice that. Did he just say sex? Did he just say sex?
Gonna get demonetized for that one. Mohg believed Miquella could have transitioned from Empyrean to God.
No way.
Maybe even Miquella
What the
believed
hell?
that he could. And
Oh my
I think
God,
Mohg
that's so
wanted
funny.
to take advantage of this process and take advantage of the new god that would soon rise. The remembrance of the Blood Lord reads, wishing to raise Miquella to full godhood, Mohg wished to become his consort, taking the role of monarch. But no matter how much of his bloody bedchamber he tried to share, he received no
That's
response
gross.
from the young Empyrean. The wording of bedchamber is appropriate considering Mohg is trying to consort with Miquella and become his lord, so to speak. And it being a bloody bedchamber is appropriate too, as items state that Mohg slumbers beside the divinity, and the cutscene seems to be suggesting that Mohg slumbers inside of Miquella's blood. Also, it's very fitting that they use the word slumber here.
Dearest Miquella,
The best voice in the game.
you must abide alone a while.
So if Mohg becomes his consort, then Mohg will become a lord of sorts, not unlike the dynamic with the Elden Lord that has existed throughout history, where they become consort to their god. But the real question that remains is, how exactly does Miquella become a god in this situation? Considering Miquella's positioning in the womb of this giant tree-like woman, it's easy to assume that what he was attempting was a sort of rebirth here. And this brings me back to Rico's dialogue, the final part, where he says, "Indeed, I beg you grant my wish, that when you transcend from Empyrean to God, allow me a place by your side." I wonder,
How's he
what
gonna
if
go
the cocoon was part
Empyrean
of
to
this
God, then?
transition? It
that
reminds
with
me a lot
blood?
of Berserk, which Miyazaki is endlessly inspired by, and spoiler alert if you haven't yet seen it, but a certain character here also achieves a similar transition inside an egg, turning from human to a god of sorts. To become a part of the God Hand in this moment and achieve his dream, Griffith has to make a sacrifice, and in the end, he chooses to betray his companions, branding them and...
So if Miquella is like Griffith, essentially, then he is going to turn out to be the bad guy.
sealing their fate. In my Miquella video, we draw a few parallels between Miquella and Griffith, and if Miquella is inspired by Griffith as much as I think,
That's what I'm
then
saying.
that could be quite concerning.
This
as
is bad news.
There is a part of Melania's storyline as well that also seems to be setting up some betrayal to come, although that is, of course, just speculation.
I
This
think
is probably a good time to talk about the
that's
fact
likely.
that Miquella does have some very ominous overtones to their character. For starters, Saint Trina has an adult form, and it's a one-eyed creature with this spooky mass of elevated hair that is carved upon Saint Trina's torch. What's more, remember Saint Trina's sleep fog draws others down into sleep against their will. Sleep is a weapon. Saint Trina's sword makes that even more clear, as does cut content, which states, "The Saint of the Cradle Song has become the very symbol of lost repose, and the feeble of heart were powerless to resist her kindness, even upon the battlefield."
Ooh,
So,
manipulation.
in cut content at least, the Saint of the Cradle Song actually fought in certain wars with kindness. So that description mentions Saint Trina's weaponized kindness, and so does this line from the trailer.
Pure and radiant, he wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men. There is nothing more terrifying.
That's so cool. That's so
Melania
cool.
also calls Miquella the most fearsome Empyrean of all. And lastly, the common soldiers of the Halig Tree discovered a bitter truth as they...
There's nothing more terrifying than using love and kindness as a weapon, because they are things that most people are unable to resist. And it's interesting that Vare was the only war surgeon that had love for Mohg in that case.
awaited their lord's return to the Halig Tree. They discovered that Miquella's sacred light would trigger them to self-destruct in their final moments.
That
But even
seems toxic.
So, they remained loyal, and I quote, "May the flash of our deaths guide Miquella's return." So in conclusion,
Killing
it's
themselves
for these
for him.
reasons that I'm a bit concerned about this scary, dreaming demigod. And
I
about
said the same
nightmares
thing at the
that
start of this
might
video.
be incurred by Mohg's ritual with him inside the cocoon. A part of me wonders if the formless mother was supposed to be a part of Miquella's ascension to God, considering the ritual happening in Mohgwyn Palace. That would fit because a few gods we see in Elden Ring do have an outer god as a patron of sorts, Malenia has the outer god of rot, and she is destined to become the goddess of rot. Marika becomes a vessel for the Elden Ring, and she is the god of the greater will, who is almost certainly an outer god as well. So all of that sort of answers how Miquella might become a god, as best we can, considering how abstract the game is with these terms. My next question is, though, did Miquella foresee any of this happening? The Bewitching Branch is an item that can pierce a foe and turn them into a temporary ally, and it reads, "The Empyrean Miquella is loved by many people. Indeed, he has learned very well how to compel such affection." The wording here is kind of sinister, right? The fact that Miquella is capable of consciously compelling affection in order to get what he wants is very manipulative.
Yeah,
And
that's what I
if
said
Miquella
earlier.
is
We're so
capable
similar,
of
Vaati.
masterminding others' affections, who's to say he hasn't done the same with Mohg?
Oh, yeah.
Mohg's infatuation with Miquella is very obvious and very cursed, considering Miquella's eternal youth and the fact that Miquella is technically Mohg's half-brother. Again, I'm reminded
Kind of
of
messed
this
up, no?
scene with Griffith from Berserk, where Griffith spends a night with a powerful, perverted older man for money, which he needs to achieve his own goals. The man, Gennon, is obsessed with Griffith, but to Griffith, Gennon is nothing more than a stone lying on the side of the path he walks, and Griffith eventually discards him as such. In my Miquella video, we talked about just how much overlap there is between the characters of Miquella and Griffith.
Yeah.
And so I just can't shake
He'll
the
be casting
feeling
Mohg
that
aside.
Miquella might be using Mohg here. But if that's true, why? What would Miquella stand to gain from masterminding this entire situation where he ends up dead and defiled?
Well, that makes me think that he's not dead and defiled, because we know that people in Elden Ring have multiple forms. It just makes me think, like, Mohg has the illusion versions of himself, as do the other characters. This may not be any different.
Before the DLC trailer dropped, I had imagined that Miquella's arm would take us into Miquella's dream world, and so I thought that Miquella might stand to benefit or suffer thanks to Mohg's actions upon his slumbering form.
He's planned this
I
whole
thought
thing.
He might have even been co-opting the formless mother for his ascension into a god. But now, from what we understand about the DLC trailer, the Land of Shadow is a place distinct from Miquella, so the answer becomes different. We know Miquella divested himself of his flesh and grace to get here, so it's harder to imagine that the bloody rituals happening in Mohgwyn are having any effect on Miquella's self. Mohg really might not be getting any response from Miquella for good reason. So I'm going to present one new theory on why Miquella might benefit from being here, based on the information we have from the DLC trailer, and it's this. So, we know Miquella divested himself of his flesh before reaching the Land of Shadow, right? And we know that he also divested himself of his grace to get here. He divested himself of his lineage, of all things golden. Divesting yourself of your flesh is hard enough, but divesting yourself of your grace is also difficult. Rani has difficulty with this in her questline. She divests herself of her flesh, finally, but even then she's still linked to the two fingers and has to kill them to be freed completely. So, what if Mohg was instrumental not just to the process of Miquella dying, but the process of Miquella losing his grace as well? What if, by being doused in accursed blood, Miquella was defiled to the point that grace left him fully? We know that those doused in Mohg's accursed blood start to grow omen horns, and the omen are graceless, and we know that being defiled is something that many people in the lands between fear. The Dung Eater is proof of that.
Yeah.
We talked earlier about how they defile people, and how those people are terrified of what this means for them and their rebirth. So it is that I think that Miquella might have wanted to die in this manner.
Maybe he'll come back stronger with like omen horns and omen strength and stuff. And he's just like marinating himself.
Fall into this state of sublime slumber, and also to be defiled to the point where grace leaves him. But that's just a theory, And of course, we don't have
There's
all of the
much to
pieces of the
consider.
story yet, and I think it's impossible to say for sure which direction his story will go. I think this state of speculation is very much exactly where From Software wants us to be at this point. Even the All-Knowing doesn't know what's going on here.
So Miquella was with the Lord of Blood after all. That is some fine intelligence indeed.
Fine intelligence.
Well, I wonder what comes next. If he continues his slumber within the cocoon, all would be well. But perhaps it would be safer to destroy it. Miquella is the one thing that remains a mystery to me.
So, what do you think? Did Miquella anticipate being taken from the Halig Tree? Will he be affected by the Lord of Blood's machinations? Mohg certainly believes so. In fact, Mohg believes this even beyond the very moment of his death.
I can see it as clear as day. The coming of our dynasty. Morgwin.
Well, fuck. I really don't know what to say. I'm gutted that we've killed Mohg, obviously, because we had to, to progress to this point in the game, because he's such an amazing character, and part of me is like hoping that maybe this is an illusion as well, and that he's going to come back in the DLC, because I feel like he has so much more to offer, and we have so much more to find out about him and his relationship to Miquella, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I'm 100% backing the theory that Miquella has been using Mohg this whole time, has made him infatuated with him somehow, through his allure or manipulation, whether it's as Cintrina or not, I don't know. But I do definitely think that Mohg thinks that he is building this dynasty and is going to serve alongside Miquella, and Miquella has allowed him to think that, but actually that's not the case at all, and he's going to drop Mohg the second he gets the chance, which I guess is now because Mohg's dead. But I think Miquella is the big bad, and at the end of the DLC we're going to have to fight him in whatever fucked up form he appears in, because if he's been marinating himself like a little chicken breast in accursed blood for how long, the fuck is he gonna look like? I have so many questions and concerns, but I'm so excited. I don't even have the words. I feel like I didn't chat as much in this one as before because I'm so overwhelmed. And I also think because we've had a second trailer since Vaati created this video, there's maybe a few extra things that we could glean that I don't feel I'm ready to unpack yet. I think I need to go away and watch the story trailer again, having watched this about Mohg and Miquella. I think it'll pull a lot of it together. But that was incredible. As always, Vaati is just an amazing lord of this community, I think, and I feel very fortunate to be in the same timeline as him and all you guys, and this game and the DLC and every Elden Ring fan and everyone who enjoys the lore and everything behind it. I feel so fortunate to exist alongside you guys. So what do we look at? Omens just makes me sad. The Formless Mother. I think I was very heavy into the period line of thinking at the start, but not anymore. I'm mostly just thinking about blood now, and how I guess blood really does relate to birth and everything anyway, so that can be all encompassing. Morgwin Dynasty, it's not going to happen, Mohg, I'm afraid. The War Surgeons, I didn't really know much about that, so that was absolutely awesome. I'm fascinated with how Miquella's dreams or nightmares are going to cross over into reality, cross over into the Land of Shadow. I'm interested to know how that's going to work. So I'm just so excited, and feeling very ready to get started with the DLC now. We've got 30 days to go as I'm recording this. So I'm so excited, and I need to make sure I get Fanta back here ready to start the DLC, ready to touch that little sad arm. of Miquella's. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Please let me know what you guys think, theories and stuff. Obviously, I don't need to tell you to go and subscribe to Vaati. There's a 100% chance you already are. Go check him out. Check out the Patreon. Check out everything. He is just wonderful, and these videos make me so happy, and it's fun watching them with you guys. And I like hearing what you think. So yeah, between our little community, it's nice to chat amongst ourselves. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you, Vaati, for being the best, and I'll see you guys pretty soon for the DLC.